In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro addresses a wide range of current political and cultural issues, beginning with a controversial immigration raid in Southern California. The raid targeted a large cannabis farm employing illegal underage immigrant labor, sparking protests and violent resistance. Shapiro critiques the left's performative outrage over the raid, highlighting the absurdity of defending illegal child labor on a federally illegal drug farm. He points out that the left's protests included obstructing ICE vehicles and even firing guns at federal agents, actions that go beyond peaceful protest into criminality. Shapiro underscores the hypocrisy of the left, who portray the raid as an attack on innocent families while ignoring the fact that illegal child labor is a serious crime deserving of federal intervention. Shapiro dissects the media and political response to the ICE raid, noting how footage of children running from tear gas was used to generate sympathy, despite the fact that many of these children were likely brought by protesting parents, themselves violating child labor laws. He criticizes California Governor Gavin Newsom's tweet condemning the raid, calling it performative politics designed to score points rather than address the underlying legal issues. Shapiro also highlights the disconnect between media narratives and actual ICE enforcement data, which shows arrests but fewer deportations than promised by the Trump administration. He argues that misinformation and false narratives about ICE fuel hostility and violence against agents, exacerbating tensions unnecessarily. The podcast then shifts to the media's portrayal of the so-called Alligator Alcatraz detention facility in Florida, where dangerous criminal, illegal immigrants are held. Shapiro contrasts the media's sensationalist claims that the Trump administration is dumping farm workers into alligator-infested swamps with the reality that the facility houses violent criminals, including murderers and gang members. He praises Florida officials for their transparency and condemns the left-wing press for amplifying false reports that downplay the threat posed by these detainees. Shapiro turns to the Democratic Party's internal struggles, focusing on the rise of radical candidates like Zoran Mandani, the Democratic nominee for New York City mayor. Mandani, described as a socialist with jihad-friendly associations, leads the race despite holding only 35% support. Shapiro warns that the Democratic Party's embrace of such extreme figures alienates moderate voters and risks handing power to dangerous ideologies. He highlights the party's big tent approach as a weakness, allowing fringe elements to gain influence unchecked. The podcast features examples of Mandani's former interns openly calling for jihad, illustrating the radicalism embedded within his campaign. Shapiro also critiques Democratic leaders like Chuck Schumer for their reluctance to distance themselves from Mandani and similar figures, suggesting that the party's tolerance of extremism is a recipe for disaster. Throughout the episode, Shapiro emphasizes the theme of performative outrage dominating left-wing politics. He mocks various Democratic politicians for their theatrical displays of resistance, such as Cory Booker's extended speeches and Jasmine Crockett's aggressive rhetoric. Crockett, a rising Democratic star in Texas, is portrayed as emblematic of the party's shift toward performative politics rather than substantive policy. Shapiro contrasts this with the Republican Party's own struggles with candidate quality, citing Ken Paxton's messy personal and political scandals as a liability in the Texas Senate race. He urges Republicans to prioritize electability and effective governance over performative posturing. Shapiro critiques former First Lady Michelle Obama for perpetuating a culture of victimhood despite her privileged background and accomplishments. He challenges her claims about the systemic barriers women face today, arguing that American women enjoy unprecedented opportunities and freedoms compared to previous generations. Shapiro points to statistics showing women's higher college graduation rates and longer life expectancy as evidence that the narrative of female victimization is overstated. He frames this victimhood ideology as part of a broader coalition politics strategy that encourages various groups to see themselves as oppressed, fueling division rather than unity. The podcast briefly touches on the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, criticizing the Department of Justice's handling of the case and the lack of transparency. Shapiro praises EPA head Lee Zeldin for his open approach to public questions about geoengineering and contrails, suggesting that similar transparency is needed in high-profile investigations like Epstein's. He calls for public officials involved in the case to hold press conferences and answer questions directly to restore trust and counter conspiracy theories. A highlight of the episode is the introduction of a new Daily Wire Plus documentary, Journey to the UFC, featuring Joe Piper, a professional mixed martial artist who overcame a difficult childhood marked by abuse and homelessness. Shapiro interviews Piper, who shares his rigorous training regimen and the discipline required to succeed in the UFC. Piper emphasizes the meritocratic nature of the sport and its appeal to young men seeking purpose and achievement in a culture that often dismisses traditional masculinity. Shapiro praises the UFC as an anti-woke meritocracy that rewards hard work and resilience, contrasting it with the softness he perceives in contemporary society. Shapiro also covers recent developments in U.S. national security, including the Pentagon's investment in rare earth minerals and magnet production to reduce dependence on China. He supports the government's stake in MP Materials as a strategic move to secure critical supply chains for defense technology. Additionally, he reports on ongoing diplomatic efforts related to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, noting skepticism about Russian intentions, but acknowledging the importance of maintaining military aid to Ukraine. The episode recalls the assassination attempt on President Trump last July, condemning the Secret Service's failure to secure the area and protect the president. Shapiro notes that 6 agents were suspended without pay, but none fired, reflecting systemic issues within the agency. He underscores the gravity of the incident and the narrow margin by which American history was spared a darker turn,